Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the Mars opposite Pluto aspect that is happening this weekend, April 26th and 27th. I'll briefly touch on the new moon in Taurus, very briefly, but mostly today's show will be about Mars opposite Pluto. Before we dive in, I wanted to let you know about my next online astrology course, which is an introduction to zodiacal releasing. This is an ancient timing technique which will show you how to mark out larger chapters in your life. So those big periods of time, we'll learn some of the nuances of the technique, but it is designed to be an introduction to this technique so that you can have a taste of what timing was like for ancient astrologers. You can find out more or sign up over at kellysastrology.com. Okay, so back to Mars opposite Pluto. Let's cover off the degrees and details, and then we'll dive into some of the themes that are likely to come up for you this last weekend in April. So Mars will be at 3 degrees Leo and opposing Pluto, which will, of course, then be at 3 degrees Aquarius. This aspect will peak and be at its exact interaction on Saturday the 26th if you're in Canada and the US. It'll be Sunday the 27th if you're in the UK, Australia, or Europe. Now, a couple of points to note. This is actually the second Mars in Leo opposite Pluto in Aquarius aspect. The first one we had was back in early January. Of course, Mars was retrograde then, but Mars was in early Leo opposing Pluto in early Aquarius. So that means that this last weekend of April is connected to those first few days of January. And you might find yourself drawn back into a passion or a problem, maybe a particular kind of disagreement from early January around this last weekend in April. And that's because we've got a similar part of the zodiac, early Leo and early Aquarius, activated in the same way now that it was then. So this is one of those ways we can see those energetic threads through time. So early January, late April, Mars opposite Leo themes. Now, since Mars does move slowly, more slowly than, say, the moon or Mercury, for instance, even though I've shared the dates when this aspect is exact, this aspect is kind of drawn out. And I don't think it's only on Saturday or on Sunday that you will feel the energy or the themes or the pushing and the pressure of this Mars opposite Pluto aspect. In fact, you might feel it for about 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe Saturday, Sunday, Monday, depending on where you are. But I really think it's just a little bit more of a slow burn that is going to be a really important part of the astro landscape over this last weekend in April. So with those practical details kind of shared, what is Mars opposite Pluto about anyway? And there's a few things. My first thought, well, it's about many deep, complex, and intense things, because we know with Pluto in the mix, we're talking about complexity, depth, we're talking about intensity, sometimes obsession. And of course, we've got Mars in the mix. Mars represents anger and passion, courage and assertiveness. Mars represents that willingness to fight, that competitive or battle-oriented instinct. Pluto, in addition to being, intense and deep, is really compelling. It can be about obsession or compulsion. Pluto is also about wealth and power. And of course, this idea of control. So we've got a lot of strong themes coming up in a kind of aggravating, uncomfortable way. And that's got to do with that opposition aspect. Because when we have two planets in an opposition, we know that there is some tension, there is a difference, quality of differences. We've got differing opinions, differing priorities, differing timelines. In an opposition, two planets are as far apart as they can physically be. So we get this idea of distance as well as differences that can come up under an opposition like this too. So if we start to pull some of those individual themes, the Mars themes, the Pluto themes, the opposition themes together, what we are, starting to get a sense of is that Mars opposite Pluto can be about intense passions. It can be about managing control dynamics. It can be about passionate disagreements. It can be about some discord. It's about a lot of energy, this sort of extreme concentrated energy wanting to be expressed or directed towards something. We also get this idea of this sort of quality of power or control. So you might be swept up in something, or you might be pushing back on something. That idea of, am I being controlled by an obsession or a fascination that I have? Am I being controlling with my thoughts or my strong opinions or my sort of determined actions? And where is the power dynamic? Where is the balance of power? Is the balance of power something you're navigating between yourself and another person? Are you navigating like a David and Goliath situation where it's one individual against an organization or a collective or a group of individuals? Are you dealing with a power dynamic within yourself where one part of you is trying to kind of ground and calm and focus, and another part of you is sort of spinning off into compulsion? So we're really looking at a lot of layers of how power themes or control themes might be coming forward. It might be that an obsession consumes you such that you are deep into researching and exploring and investigating, sort of harnessing the power and the intensity of this Mars-Pluto aspect and directing it towards a mission, a cause, or a passion, where you're sort of creating a container or an outlet to channel this potent energy into, can lead to some really rich rewards. It might mean you have to be very single-minded in your focus, that you're kind of slaying distractions and really getting deep into this one thing that you want to give your full attention to. You're allowing yourself to be obsessed by it. So that idea of deeply going into things, investigating, with when Pluto's in the mix, we want to get to the bottom of things. We're pushing back. We're willing to have confrontations. We're willing to ask difficult questions or raise uncomfortable topics. Whenever Pluto is in the mix, you do want to figure things out at that deeper level, like leaving no stone unturned. Let's get right to the heart of something. Where does this originate from? Where is it coming from? Why is it here? What is the secret inside you that is driving you, that is kind of affecting your choices and actions? You don't have to share that secret. You don't have to do a big reveal, but you probably want to admit to yourself what's really driving you, whether it's something you want or something you're afraid of that you're trying to push away from. So pushing for answers, being determined to solve a problem or really thrash something out, like we've got a disagreement, we've got a difference of opinions, we need to get in here and figure it out, like get in the ring together. So this idea of pushing past things through sheer force of will, or being willing to stand in the discomfort and in that place of disagreement to kind of move through it, these are all things that are possible with this Mars opposite Pluto aspect. Now, that idea of sheer force of will, there are experiences when people have these types of aspects where they just get so dedicated and focused to something that the force of their willful, attentive energy drives them through things that were barriers or limitations in the past. So one possible expression of this Mars opposite Pluto aspect is this extreme productivity when it's directed towards a very specific goal or project or outcome. So Mars-Pluto combinations can definitely activate this intense concentration and effort, like being so set on something that, you can move the mountain with your action or your focus. There's sort of, there's a place for obsession when we are aware that we're giving that obsession some space or some power. The issue with obsessions is when we don't know we're obsessed with something, when we're doing things compulsively, but in an unconscious way. So some of the differences between working with Pluto in maybe a healthy, constructive way versus an unhealthy, potentially destructive way can be that simple sense of, are you consciously in this intense, compelling space? or are you unconsciously influenced by someone or something? So, with Mars opposite Pluto this weekend, navigating tension and working through differing priorities, navigating differences is definitely going to be part of our experiences. It's also likely that power dynamics need to be re examined as well. You might want to understand the origins of a dynamic that you're just becoming aware of. Or maybe you're just tuning into, oh, there's a power play going on here. I didn't see it before. I wasn't aware of it, but now I'm attuning to the undercurrent. You might be surprised by a controlling experience that you didn't expect. So, this idea of re-examining power dynamics, where are your loyalties? To who or what are you aligning and allying yourself? That idea of alliances and allegiances and loyalties. Who do we want to fight for or with? Who do we trust to fight beside us? And who do we feel like we need to fight against? And these are all Mars things. Mars loves that kind of competitive spirit, that battle orientation. And that's why, how do we fight? What do we fight about? How do we manage our anger? Are we aware when anger takes over us? These are all things that are likely to come up under this Mars opposite Pluto aspect. Now, keeping in mind that Mars and Pluto are facing off with each other across two fixed signs, Leo and Aquarius, there's also a lot of stubborn and determined energy here. You might find yourself in a stalemate with someone where you've both dug your heels in and nobody wants to budge. So we're going to have to be patient, but also persistent. What we're trying to grapple with is some really deep, maybe very old and very entrenched patterns about assertiveness, about anger, and about autonomy. And they only shift with great effort or with great persistence. And so whether you grapple with it all this weekend or you grapple with a part of it, it's important to attend to the sources of annoyance and irritation, even anger or rage as they emerge. The other piece I wanted to share or just bring up for you to think about is that this Mars opposite Pluto aspect, this dynamic of Mars in Leo standing against Pluto in Aquarius, this is just the second time we've had this aspect so far, but it is going to be a pattern that will repeat every 2 years or so for the next 20 years. And so there's a clue here that you might be starting to get fired up about something that's newer to you. Maybe you are angry about things that you've never been angered about before. Maybe you're passionate about something that you never cared for before. That's great. That is bringing in this idea of the new passions for the new era. So as you're getting fired up about things that are new to you, you might find yourself in new kinds of power dynamics. You might notice that you're starting to have different kinds of disagreements with the people around you. You know how when you're in long-term friendships or relationships with people, there's always, oh, we always disagree about this. This is the thing we fight about or that we're not on the same page about. It may be that the things that you're not on the same page about anymore are different from what they used to be. So this is a lot like turning into both new passions and new battles for this new Pluto in Aquarius era. So keep in mind that Pluto in Aquarius is a longer trend. It began in 2024 and it continues until 2044. And that is a longer trend that will shift power dynamics. It shifts alliances, both personally and collectively. It shifts our interest in terms of who or what we want to get obsessed with and who or what we want to maybe stop being obsessed with. And so as these Pluto and Aquarius shifts start to roll through our charts and our lives, the things that you want to stand for and stand against are going to change. What you feel passionately about is changing. And so what annoys you and what angers you is also evolving. And this Mars-Pluto opposition aspect is a lot about calling your conscious attention to new things that may be annoyances or sources of anger and irritation, not because the cosmos wants you to be more annoyed or angry, but because they want you to pay attention to where in your life you will now need to learn new skills around assertiveness, around your passions and interests, and around that sense of empowering yourself to take charge. So this aspect may not always be fun. Pluto opposite Mars aspects are not the ones that we're like, oh, I'm so happy it's coming. But it's very rich and it can be very constructive if you're willing to get into it. What Pluto Mars aspects, or Mars Pluto aspects, I should say, can help you with is to help you connect with those undercurrents that you weren't aware of. Oh, I had a passion there. I didn't realize I felt so strongly about that. Or I'm really angered by this. I wonder what that's activating in me. What is that calling forward within myself? So, as we're getting this sense of what the undercurrents are, you'll be able to make choices about what to do and what to fight for with a lot more conscious awareness. Any major aspect that's involving Pluto in Aquarius is definitely going to be bringing up new dynamics for the new era. We've got a mix of planets that will interact with Pluto in Aquarius in different ways. This is just the Mars version of it. So with Mars in this mix with Pluto in Aquarius, it's time to attune to those new passions and needs, but also to explore new ways of expressing anger and asserting yourself, especially about these emerging wants that you're just starting to become aware of. One of the things that I also want to share, just as another piece of food for thought, if you like, around this. Earlier today, I was rereading some parts of When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron, which is a beautiful little book in the Buddhist tradition, if you've not read it. And I was reminded of the Buddhist concept of refraining, so kind of holding back, if you like. Why would I talk about this with Mars Pluto, which is so kind of intensely go? Chodron talks about how through refraining, we avoid habitually acting out impulsively. She talks about how the practice of refraining can help with noticing restlessness or fear, and that instead of instantly grabbing for entertainment or escape the minute we sense this discomfort, whether it's anger or fear or something else, that we have a lot to gain by refraining from that impulse and instead being with whatever is causing the discomfort, fear, anger, annoyance. And as soon as we start talking about changing our impulsive tendencies, I know we're in the territory of Mars because that impulsive, impatient quality is definitely a Mars thing. So refraining from those impulsive or compelling tendencies, especially those that might be distracting you from things that are uncomfortable or hard. You know, Chodron talks about how refraining can be a way of being in the pause, in the space between the ick and the escape, or between the anger and the reaction, and how learning to be in this space can help minimize our compulsiveness. And so sort of reflecting on that idea of refraining, and another way of talking about that in maybe more modern language would be like the idea of self-regulation, you know, the idea of you notice you're having a reaction to something. Can you pause, breathe, take a beat before you react or respond? So this idea of the refrain, of being in that space, I think it's helpful because a Mars opposite Pluto aspect can really highlight those compulsions, those obsessions, or those unconscious tendencies that are driving us. Even though it's a difficult aspect, it can help indicate you might learn something that is affecting you in a way that you don't like under this aspect. And so under this sort of Mars-Pluto aspect, where we've got this spotlight on compulsions or unconscious tendencies, this concept of refraining might be helpful, might be a helpful strategy. If you notice yourself reaching for something out of habit or to avoid an uncomfortable feeling, could you instead stay with what's annoying or unsettling you? Could you stay with the, oh my God, I'm really annoyed right now, or I'm really pissed off, or that thing that happened really angered me? Instead of going to, tune out social media, food, TV, just mindlessness, could you just be with that irritation? If so, it'll be uncomfortable, but it might be so good for you in your overall evolution, because being with the discomfort might help you find your way to a deeper sense of personal power. I know that kind of thing angers and irritates me, but I can manage my response to it rather than kind of compulsively reacting to it. Giving yourself that space can give you a choice in that moment. So, giving yourself that refrain, it might help you learn new ways to be still with yourself rather than always in that active, distracting, doing, reacting kind of space. So there's lots of layers that we can get into just by picking one aspect. So hopefully that's given you a mix of ways to think about the Mars opposite Pluto aspect. I am going to talk about the new moon in Taurus, which I promise, and I will do it quite briefly. Let me know what you are learning about anger, about passion, about the different kinds of disagreements that you do and don't want to have under this Mars Pluto aspect. Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear. So the new moon in Taurus, and I'm intentionally talking about this last, and it is, I really just have like 4 sentences on this. The reason I want to talk about it last is that technically the new moon in Taurus happens after the Mars opposite Pluto aspect. And the new moon is at 7 Taurus. It's on Sunday in most locations, Monday in Australia. And this is a really lovely new moon. And it is a new moon that, for a couple of reasons, has this kind of sweet, enjoyable energy about resetting and about being in the present and about being in a place for pleasure and connection. Part of it is that the new moon arrives shortly after the Mars-Pluto aspect. Mars will be at 4 degrees Leo by the time the new moon happens. So Mars-Pluto aspect is Saturday. The new moon is the next day for most of us. For some of us, the Mars-Pluto aspect is early in the morning on Sunday, and the new moon will be later in the day on Sunday. So the sequence is Mars-Pluto first and then new moon. So the new moon is like, right, we've had to deal with some more uncomfortable or difficult experiences or emotions, and now we're moving through it. The new moon in Taurus is looking forward. It's a beautiful reset. It's a great new moon for intention setting, for kind of cleansing and releasing, for focusing on where you want to go. So this idea of like washing the slate clean is something that I think a lot about for this new moon in Taurus. The new moon, of course, in Taurus is ruled by Venus, who's still in Pisces for just a few more days. And Venus herself is just separating from a conjunction with Saturn. And so that's another clue that this new moon is about moving past obstacles. It might be a chance to leave a complex or a heavy situation in the past. Maybe there's still a little bit of work to do, but you've gone through the most challenging or uncomfortable piece. If you've been dealing with themes of loneliness or isolation or lack of Venus in your life, a lack of connection, a lack of fun, a lack of pleasure, to do with that Venus-Saturn aspect, this new moon in Taurus is a chance to kind of reinvigorate around those topics and those areas. So to me, this new moon in Taurus is a chance to think about finding new joy and new pleasure, like sweet treats or little delights, and really focusing on them in the days and weeks to come. So that is this week's episode, with a bit of a deep dive on Mars opposite Pluto, as well as a quick look at that new moon in Taurus. I wish you all the very best until we talk again. Take care.